Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Model Building Start to Finish. This is John. I'm sitting here with Dan, and what do you know? We're looking at the SD40-2 yet again.
Yep.
But I will say, though, it's coming together. It looks more like a real engine now.
We're getting close to being done with the first phase of this.
That's nice. How many phases are there?
Well, I'm talking about the building and putting parts on phase.
Okay.
And then we'll get into the painting phase.
Then we're going to get into lighting and DCC phase.
Yeah, that comes later. But basically what's left, since we've been working our way up from the bottom of the model, there's basically two main areas left to tackle. One is the roof with the fans, because we put the fan bases in, but we didn't do anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And also it needs some lift rings and things like that. And then there's the cab area, which has antennas and conduits and an air conditioner and some other stuff. And a couple little things on the cab face, too. So I think it makes sense to maybe look at the fans first and do all the lift rings and everything, and then other details will go on top of that.
Oh, so I guess we'll get started on the fans then.
Yeah. So this is one of the fans you get with Detail Associates part number 2006. It has 3 of these in it. This is a Q fan, has the main fan part, and then the actual fan blades, and then some little details over here. And these little circles are just basically a holder so that the blades will stay on. There's a little spindle under the fan shroud. Yeah,
I think I've seen something similar to this that you put on another model a while back, but the fan was actually metal.
Yeah, the Canon parts use metal fans, and we're going to use those in the dynamic brake section, but these are for the radiator.
Okay.
And there's 3 of these, and I know a while back I already cut one of these out so that I could test fit it to the model as I was cutting the holes in the roof.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to go ahead and cut the rest of the parts out now and put one of these together. So we got to assemble all 3 of them.
Okay.
I'll start with my sprue cutters and remove the fan blades from the sprue. Just 2 simple cuts like this. And you can take a file and just clean up a little bit on the edges, although this probably isn't too necessary because these are going to be barely visible anyway.
Yeah, they'll be behind the fan grill, right?
Right. So that's really all there is to do with that part for now. The hardest part to cut out is probably the fan shroud itself, because it's wedged in here pretty tight and you can't get sprue cutters on it.
Yeah.
So the only real choice is to use a sharp knife and to just score it very carefully.
Yeah, because if you push down, it's going to damage it.
Yeah, you don't want to risk damaging it. So I kind of just do this very carefully. It's a little bit tedious, but this will work and you won't damage anything. You just got to do this on... It's really only attached on this end and this end.
Uh-huh.
It's not really attached back here. So mostly this is like all the fan shrouds have a round base, and then there's like 2 flat spots.
Yeah.
So it's basically attached at the flat spots.
Yep.
So that makes it a little easier to cut out.
So we have very unusual lighting here, Dan.
Yeah.
In order to see the circles you're about to talk about.
Yeah. What I was going to mention is that on the bottom of the fan shroud, there's these little circles around the edge. And some of these are raised up just a hair.
Uh-huh.
So what I want to do is just lightly file this to kind of level it out.
Oh, so they're not supposed to really stick out?
No, because what I want to do is this whole base should have a nice flush fit against the roof of the model.
Right. And
so
you're gonna glue it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so those are going to make that harder. So we just want to file those off, basically.
Why are those there? Is it just...
I have no idea. It's just some remnant of the molding process, I guess.
Maybe it's where the plastic flows into the mold or something.
Yeah, I don't know. But we'll just take a flat file and just kind of go over it. It doesn't take much to get rid of them.
So couldn't you theoretically just like put the whole thing down on a piece of sandpaper and rub lightly or something like that to get it all at once?
You could, except for this fact that the center spindle sticks down further than the base of the fan.
Oh, too bad.
Yeah. All right, so each fan comes with 3 little lift tabs.
Okay.
These are really small.
Yeah, they're small in the picture too.
Yeah. So I would recommend cutting these off one at a time and then gluing them onto the fan.
Oh, right, so you don't lose them?
Right. So I'm just going to cut off one of these.
Yeah, I'd be afraid it would shoot across the room, too.
Yeah. In fact, I don't.
I think it's still on there.
Oh, yeah, there it is. There it is.
Yeah, that thing is really small.
They're very small. I don't think this is going to show up on camera because I can barely see these things when I'm looking at this 2 inches away with a magnifying glass.
And your eyes are better than mine.
Yeah. But there's 3 little tiny ridges on the fan base.
Okay.
Where the little, they're basically locator tabs for those lift rings, the thing I just cut out.
Mm-hmm.
And they're spaced at 120 degree intervals around the edge of the fan, and there's one of them along this flat spot right here, and then there's another one along the opposite flat spot right over here, and then the other one is kind of in the middle on this side.
Okay.
And if you look closely, I don't know if you can see this, but there's actually a little support piece under the grill here. I don't know, I can turn the fan a little bit. But the lift ring basically lines up with those support pieces. I know there's lots of other things running through here, so it gets confusing because there's so many pieces running across the circles around the edge.
Yeah, little spokes.
Yeah, little spokes. But basically they align with one of those.
Yeah, I actually can see that. It looks like it's under the grill, right?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
So what I need to do, and this is, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this on camera because it's really hard to do even just by myself, but with a little bit of liquid styrene cement, is to hold each one of these lift rings in place and then glue it around the edge.
Well, we can try, and if nothing else, we'll come back and show what it looks like finished.
Yeah. Okay, so I think the best way to do this that I've found is to actually, I have the little lift ring gripped in the tweezers, and I've put the fan shroud on some tape to keep it from moving around. And I have a little bit of CA glue, and I'm just going to put the slightest little bit on the edge of the lift ring part. And then I'm going to position it against the fan shroud. Okay, so now that it's tack glued in place, I'm going to take some liquid styrene cement on a brush and glue it for real.
Oh, I see. So you were just using the CA. I know you said this, but it didn't register with me. So you just tacked it in place with the CA. This is actually going to glue it so it doesn't pop off, right?
Right. Hopefully now it should be pretty secure. Although I will say, be careful when handling these because, it doesn't take a whole lot to dislodge this. The last piece to put on the fan shroud is this little conduit. Now, they give you 2, and I guess some Q fans had 2 of these, but some engines only had 1, and as near as I can tell, the Santa Fe SD40-2s only had 1. So I'm just going to use 1.
And again, it is so small.
Yeah. So I'm just going to cut it off. I'm not sure. There. What I did is I cut just the smallest amount, a very minuscule amount, from the short end of this so that when I put it up to where it mounts, the bottom of it would fit flush with the edge of the fan shroud.
Okay.
So it basically attaches at the end here and then just sits on the outside of the fan shroud, and I glued it and then trimmed off the excess and filed it down so that the bottom of it is even with the rest of the fan shroud bottom.
Okay.
Now these attach at, there's actually, it runs in, there's a little, one of those little spokes. And if you look very carefully, there's 2 spokes that don't match anything else, and those would go to the conduits. If there was a second conduit, it would be over here. But I was looking at photos of the Santa Fe units, and they seem to have them just this one.
Okay.
Which was to the left of this as I'm looking at it anyway.
As the camera's looking, it's to the right.
To the right, yeah. Okay, so we'll say to the right of this middle support.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So this is going to go on the locomotive eventually.
Right.
And I'm guessing that all those little things have a place to go with respect to the rest of the locomotive, right?
Yeah, they go in an orientation, yeah.
Oh, boy.
And you have to use photographs to figure that out. That's what I really had to carefully study photos to even figure out this much.
Uh-huh.
But they're all this. The good thing is that all the fans seem to be the same, and it's time to mount them, there's like two that face one way and one that faces the other way around. It's like backwards. So we'll get to that later, but first I got to build the other two of these.
Okay, so is it basically the same process, though?
The same exact thing 3 times.
Okay, then we'll come back after the third one and show the next part.
Right. So I've completed all 3 fans. And one thing to take note of is the orientation of the parts. These have a flat side, and those go front and back on the engine. The round sides go to the sides.
Okay, I can see that here.
Yeah. And then the other thing to take note of is the orientation of the conduit. So I've got them all pointed the same way right here. But actually in photos on the locomotive that I found, and I'm kind of cheating because I found a different, actually a BNSF one of these that after was renumbered, because I don't have a good roof shot of 5126. So this is one of those cases where I picked another one that's kind of like it, and I'm using that.
Guesstimations.
Right. But basically 2 of these conduits point one way and the other fan is flipped around.
Okay.
The other thing to think about is painting. Now, my photos of this engine, when it was on the Santa Fe, like pre-95, show these fans blue, same color as the rest of the body.
Yeah.
So I can go ahead and glue them on.
Because you're going to paint the body blue anyway.
Right. I noticed, though, that like later pictures of this engine as a BNSF engine in the 2000s or late 2000s, at least one of these fans was a little bit discolored, like a lighter blue. I think it was the center one. And if you want to reproduce that, it would be a lot easier to leave the fan off the model until after it's painted, and then you could actually just paint this a different color, because otherwise trying to mask this is really difficult.
I could see why it would be.
Yeah, and some of these Q fans I've noticed on some locomotives are gray, or they're just like primer color or something. So you really have to look at photos of the particular engine you're working on.
Right. So now since your era is 90s, you're going to glue them on now?
Yeah, I'm going to glue them on now since they're overall blue and they match the engine. So I haven't glued these on yet, but I've positioned them in approximately the right locations, and I've studied the photos to get the orientation. So the fan that's furthest forward has the conduit pointing this way.
Oh, toward you?
Yeah, well, kind of at a diagonal.
Yeah, but away from the camera.
Right. And these 2 have it pointed this way.
Mm-hmm. Now, I have a quick question before you say anything else. You're not looking at a picture of this locomotive.
No.
You're using a picture of some other locomotive. Does it even matter at that point? I mean, why not just make it how you want it? Do you see what I mean?
Because it does match the picture that I have of this engine from the side, for one thing. Okay. Yeah. And generally, I'm basically making the assumption that they were all probably built the same way.
Uh-huh.
Because it's another snoot-nosed SD40-2 from the same series.
Isn't it possible, though, that it was worked on and maybe someone put the thing on?
It's possible, but lacking any better information, I'm going to go with what I have. At least it's based on something that way.
Yeah, I'm just curious because it seems like you can choose any way you want.
I've seen other SD40-2s that were set up like this.
Okay.
So I'm assuming there's some reason for it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I haven't glued these on quite yet. One thing I want to mention again, the flat pieces go front and back, and they're not quite touching, so there's a little bit of space. Also, I'm leaving the blades out because those need to be painted silver and then weathered. I suppose you could also paint them blue. I don't think railroads are too careful when they run an engine through the paint booth about what the fan blades are doing, but they'll show up better if they're a contrasting color. And if I put them in without painting them, they're going to look like just bare plastic, which would be ugly. And plus, these are open a little bit, so it's possible that some overspray would get to them. So because there's holes in the bottom, it should be easy enough once the whole shell is painted to glue them in later.
Right. It'll look better.
Yeah. Okay, so I've positioned the middle fan directly above the hole. And the reason I'm starting with the middle one is because it's a little easier to access for gluing before the other fans are in place.
Oh, right. That makes sense. Kind of common sense, right?
So it's centered side to side, and this little thing is pointing that way, the little lift tab, and the flat part is over here. So it should be in the right place.
Well,
and I'll just take a little bit of liquid styrene cement and run it around the base. Even though it probably won't show, there was a little bit of sheen from the glue around the fans, so I just gave it a very light sanding with a little folded up piece of 400 grit paper.
Right, just to get rid of it, kind of?
Yeah, even though it's probably not strictly necessary, because once it's painted, it's really not going to show anyway. Now I've got some Detail Associates 2222 eye bolts that I've cut the shanks down a little bit so they're not so long.
This is for lift rings, I bet?
Yeah, for the lift rings in the back. Since they're larger, I'm going to use these. And just put a little tiny drop of CA on this, and I'm just going to insert it into the holes that we drilled quite a while ago.
Yeah, I don't even remember now, but I'm sure you did.
Yeah. So there's going to be one of these on each corner back here. The next thing that needs to go back here is the rear grab iron. Now, I think you can buy these as pre-bent parts, but I'm just going to bend one myself since it's not too difficult. Now, there's two kinds you'll find on most EMD engines. One of them is sort of a semicircular piece, and the other is a pointy thing. This one has the pointy one.
Oh, that's lucky.
Yeah, a little easier to bend. So I'm going to start and try to make a bend that's approximately the same as the angle of the rear of the shell.
Mm-hmm. So now, are you going to use an eye bolt in the middle, or is it?
No, there's no support in the middle.
Huh, interesting.
That looks pretty close.
Yep.
So then what we have to do is the little point should be centered, and you want to take it, there's little holes right here and right here where the grab iron needs to go in, and we need to bend it down there.
So this is a 90-degree bend, right?
Right. And it's really hard for me to see what I'm doing.
Well, we'll do it off camera and come back with it bent.
Okay. So I got this thing bent, and I'm going to just insert it in the holes.
Yeah, it's interesting how it goes sort of in between the lift rings and the fan.
Yeah, and this one I think I'll glue from the underside.
Uh-huh.
Since these little prongs are pretty accessible in there.
Okay.
So I glued it from the inside, and the only thing to keep in mind when gluing is, one, it should be level so that it's level with the top of the engine body. And the distance between the railing and the top of the body is approximately the height of this circular base around the fan.
Oh, okay.
Not the grill on top, but just this base part.
Yeah, the part where the grill sort of extends from.
Yeah. The last part in this back area is the sand filler hatch, which goes right here. However, this is just sitting here. I'm not going to actually glue this on yet. And the reason for that is because the separation line, when this is painted between the yellow and the blue, is right here.
Oh, no.
Right. So if I glued this on, because I always paint the light color first, so it's going to get primer, then yellow, then blue, which means I would have to mask the yellow. And if this big thing is in the way, that's going to make it really difficult.
Yeah.
So instead, I'm just going to leave that off for now. What I've done instead is stuck this part to a little piece of blue tape, and that way I'll be able to paint it separately from the model, and then it'll be painted yellow also, and then when it comes time to do the final assembly, then I can put it on.
Oh, I see. So it lives on the blue tape until it's ready to go on the model?
Right. Next, I'm going to move on to the dynamic brake section, and I'm going to replace the part that I took off when I cut the fan holes. Should just pop back into place. Actually, it's tight enough I probably don't even really need to glue it, but I'll go ahead and glue it from the back. For the lift rings around the dynamic brake section, I'm going to use these Plano parts. This is number 14651.
Okay.
Plano offers these in several sizes. They're made like this with a ring on both ends, and the idea is to cut out this part and fold it in half and then glue the ends together or let the paint fill in so that it looks like one solid piece.
Okay.
However, I found that it's really hard to do that without having some kind of a gap. So what I like to do is to just take one of these, cut it in half, and make 2 lift rings out of it.
Yeah, that makes more sense because when you fold it, unless you have a press of some sort,
there's always a gap every time I've tried it.
Yeah.
Maybe someone else has a trick for that. But anyway, what I like to do is I take the back of the X-Acto blade, okay, this part, and cut with that. And basically you're just going to put it right on that little part where it joins the fret and just kind of push the knife down through it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes a couple of tries.
You don't want to use the skinny part of the knife because it'll break.
It'll just bust it off. Yeah, this is stainless steel, so it takes a little bit of cutting to get through it. It's actually tougher than it looks. I got the part off, and I'm holding one of the little circles between my thumb and finger, and you can see kind of in the center there's this little nub where it was attached to the fret of the part. So I'm going to cut it before that, and then I'll cut it on the other side and just get rid of that thick part.
Right.
I'm going to put these lift rings in just like I did the other ones, just a little tiny bit of CA on them, and then just stick them into the holes that are already drilled.
They do look nice.
Yeah. For this part, I'm using Plano 14653 lift rings, which are just a little bit smaller.
It seems like it would be hard to tell if they should be smaller or bigger, just from the pictures, you know?
Yeah, the ones up here in the photos look a little smaller than the ones in the back.
Yeah.
They seem to get bigger as they go toward the back. So that's kind of what I've been trying to do.
Maybe because there's more weight in the back of one of these things, huh?
Maybe. Now is probably a good time to prepare the upper part of the Canon dynamic brake fans.
Okay, those are the 2 in front of the other 3 that you put in already?
Yeah, right in the middle of the engine. Mm-hmm. One thing I wanted to mention, this is the 2 fan rings for the top fan rings that came with the kit that I installed. Uh-huh. And as you can see, this one's kind of mangled beyond recognition.
Yeah, what's up with that?
Well, I have these clear carrying boxes that I got from the hardware store, and one was sitting out in the sun, and I guess it got hot enough to melt this. So a little word of warning, don't leave these out in the sun.
Heat exposure.
Yeah.
It had a heat stroke.
Yeah. Fortunately, I've got a little stockpile of these things, so I was able to raid my stash and get a replacement. Cutting these out, you just want to be really careful. Do it on a cutting surface, and you could use sprue cutters, but it's sometimes a little hard to get the sprue cutters in there. Uh-huh. So I just use an X-Acto blade and just kind of very carefully cut through like this.
I can see what you're doing. I can see why sprue cutters would be hard too, because you have to get in a very slim, especially there.
Yeah. So now I just need to clean these up a little, cut off the extra plastic.
Do you file them too, or just cut?
Yeah, I'm just getting as much as I can off with the knife. And I would be very gentle with these things because they're really thin and easily broken.
Yeah, I mean, if the sun was enough to warp it, I imagine it must be pretty delicate plastic.
Yeah, so I just go through these with the file and the knife and clean up any flash or little burrs or whatever is on there. Don't trim off these little parts, though. Those are part of the casting.
Right. So it's only where it got disconnected from the tree, right?
Right. By the way, I probably mentioned this before when we first started putting the fan bases in, but this is Canon Part 1853.
Okay.
Comes with 2 fans. And to cut out the grills and the blades, I basically used the same technique I used for the lift rings. So I used the back of the blade and just very carefully cut out all the parts where it attaches.
Right. So this takes a while, huh?
Yeah, and you want to be really careful not to bend these because it's really easy to get these things mangled.
Uh-huh. They look very delicate.
Yeah, they are. I need to file off the little nubs left over from cutting it off the fret. And I'm going to file this way, sort of edge on. I don't want to file across the fan because it might bend it.
Yeah. I could see how that would happen.
Yeah.
It's a lot stronger the way you're doing it, and I notice how close to the edge you're holding it too.
Right.
Yeah, smart idea.
Yeah, so just, it doesn't take too much, usually. I also have to file the little nubs off of the fan blades.
Mm-hmm.
These are extremely fragile, so I'm gripping the blade that I'm going to work on with my needle nose pliers so that just a little tiny bit of it sticks up, and then I can file it without worrying about damaging it too much.
I'm a little surprised you're not doing it in the same way you did the ring.
Well, the trouble is I don't want to grab one of the other blades by accident and twist it.
Yeah.
So you don't need to take too much, just a little. There's a couple different ways to put these fan tops together. The instructions recommend to put the grill in the fan ring and then glue that and then glue it on top. I have seen some other people take the fan ring and glue it to the fan base and then I guess save this part for after painting.
And is there some benefit to doing that?
I'm not sure. I guess maybe you could get a little bit of a stronger bond between the base and the ring if you glued this first. But I think I'm just going to go ahead and do it the way I've been doing it, which is as the instructions recommend.
Okay.
So I've temporarily put this grill into the little recess that runs around the top of the ring.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about this is to try to pay attention to the orientation of the spokes versus the little things on the side.
Oh, those little dots you're not supposed to sand off?
Yeah, I think those are bolts or something, the real ones. But there's 6 of those equally spaced around the outside, and then you've got these spokes in the fan. So basically looking at photos, the nearest I've been able to determine, there's one of these bolts front and back, and then 2 on the sides, and then the grill itself is kind of oriented so that this front bolt is right in the middle of this pie-shaped thing. So I think that's how it should go. I've seen them put together other ways, so it really depends on the particular engine you're modeling.
I think you'd want to look at the pictures for that, too.
Yeah, if you can find any, yes. Yeah. And in this case, I'm looking at that other engine that I found a roof shot of, which used to be Santa Fe 5135, so it's very close to this one.
Mm-hmm.
So once you're satisfied with the positioning of these things, and just take some liquid styrene cement and run it around the top. I'm not sure why this works because this is only supposed to work on plastic to plastic, but it does. It must soften the plastic just enough to
hold it in, huh?
To hold it in, yeah. So these are more parts that won't be attached until after the model's painted. Because otherwise it would be impossible to paint the insides of the fans.
Yeah. So these go in your blue tape collection with the sand hatch?
This is where we start assembling a collection of parts on tape so that they're a little more convenient to paint. So I've almost denuded the sprue of parts here. The last things I need to cut out are these hubs for the fan blades. Mm-hmm. The only other parts that are on here are these things, which are rings to put around the fan bases for GP units. Some GP units had a dynamic brake fan that was raised up a little. It doesn't apply to SD units, so we can just ignore those.
Okay.
But I'm going to use my sprue cutters on these since I can get to the parts fairly easily. And just...
It's a lot quicker with the sprue cutters, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So I'm not actually going to put the hubs and blades together yet, because I want to leave the blades separate for painting.
Okay.
Or actually, in that case, not painting. I usually leave those natural. So I'm going to poke a little hole in my blue tape, and that way the little spindle...
Oh, the hole can go through the hole?
Yeah, will fit in there, and then it'll hold it.
So you're putting all your fan stuff on the same piece of tape?
Right.
Yeah.
To keep all the parts together.
Kind of a good idea, I think.
And those little bottom pieces are flat, so they'll just stick on there. It'll only paint one side, but those are hardly visible anyway, so it really won't matter. There. And then we can just set this whole thing aside. That's pretty much the roof details for the fans and lift rings.
Yeah, for now, huh?
For now. And I think that's a good place to end this episode.
Okay.
And next time we can pick it up with the stuff that goes on top of the cab and the conduits and all that stuff.
All right. Well, thanks for watching. We'll see you then.